Hey, what's up, everyone? In this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking to a real estate investor. He's also a client. I've known him for over 15 years, and I've seen what he's been doing in the market. And what I want to tell you is this. Everyone who's out there right now wondering about, is now the time to get into real estate? You're sitting on the sidelines. You're not sure if you should take that step. Well, my guest, Tarl Yarber of Fixated on Real Estate. He's also the co-founder of the Limitless Expo with Ken McElroy, is my special guest who is going to come on today, and he's going to talk about the real estate market and whether or not you should be investing today. Tarl, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Clint, thanks for having me. It's amazing how we really have known each other that long. That's crazy.
I
But
know it makes us feel old, right?
a little bit, a little bit. I thought I was young when I started this business, not anymore.
Yeah, I can see the gray in you. You didn't have that when you're up in Seattle.
Yeah, it's called stress, but yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about your story about how you got started in real estate with the flipping and then moving into rental real estate, as we were talking about before we started. I think that's so on point, and a lot of people that are thinking about it need to understand that to get into to really value properties, you have to understand what goes into a property. So that'd be great if you could start with that.
Yeah, no problem. I actually technically I bought a course in 2005 before the 2008 crash, and I was 20 years old at the time. So went to a sellathon, right? One of those places where like a whole bunch of big speakers are there, and they're really there just to sell you stuff. And I didn't know I was 20, and I bought a course on how to wholesale real estate, assigning contracts, and that's how I got originally started. I did 3 deals in 2006, and then I stopped doing real estate all the way together until late 2010. And it's not because the market was crashing that I got out. It's because I hated real estate at the time. I didn't like it. So I just like bounced out after my 3rd deal. And then due to REO, market circumstances, life changes, I kind of stumbled back into it at the end of 2010. And then I've been full time in it pretty much ever since. And I specifically got into flipping. So if you go back in time in 2010, 2011, with all the REOs, all the foreclosures, everything, it was very, very, very challenging to get any kind of funding as an investor back then. The quote deals were prevalent, but the money wasn't, even though we didn't really know they were deals. It's easy to look at hindsight, on a market to say like, oh, there's deals everywhere. And like, I could tell you firsthand, like we didn't know that those were deals everywhere. And most people didn't. And especially if you couldn't get funding for it. And so that was very challenging. So we basically flipped a lot of stuff. We had access to a lot of quote deals, but the margins were thin, right? And we didn't know they were deals. That was the big thing. So I kind of got suckered into, for lack of a better word, flipping because of the quick income, quick cash. Did that for years, years and years and years. And it wasn't until 2016 until I actually kept my first rental, which is kind of embarrassing to say that I did almost 500 flips in that time period and had 0 rentals until 2016. And it wasn't until I kept my first rental that all of a sudden I realized how silly I've been when it comes to doing this real estate business. I got caught up in the income game instead of the wealth building game, and taxes and all that great stuff. It's kind of hard to believe that after that many properties, I didn't really understand depreciation even. Like I really
Hmm.
didn't. I heard about it and I'm like, cool, that sounds great. Anyways, I'm gonna go flip houses. And I just kept doing that. And so, but after I started keeping my first few properties, I kind of got addicted to it. In 2018, I became a recovering house flipper where I only focused on keeping properties, pretty much utilizing the BRRRR strategy, which is the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat strategy. I got lucky during the time period I was doing that to where almost every property that I did became what's called an infinite BRRRR, which is where, at the end of the project, I buy a messed up house, I fix it up like a flip, but instead of selling it, I keep it and I refinance it, get 100% of my money out, and it still cash flows. So it's an infinite return. I got under the assumption that that's like normal, right? That's supposed to happen. And because every deal I did was that, I'm like, this is
Hmm.
great. Like, so, and then 2022 rolls around and the rates go up, and then all of a sudden it wasn't doing that anymore. And I kind of took a break for about a year, 2023. I just wanted to see what was going on in the world. And I took a pause. And then in January 2024, I started buying again with a new like fervor, just basically and even to this day, I'm buying as much as I can, but with the thought process of keeping everything and opportunistically flipping. So, kind of my entire concept today is keep the best, sell the rest, and using my active income that maybe I'm making on some of these flips and putting it back into passive assets for the long term. And to kind of summarize it, Clint, it's like my question I'm constantly asking myself in real estate right now is that will my future self thank me on this deal or not? And there
Yeah.
definitely are deals where my future self would thank me if I sold it right now because I hate because the deal sucks or whatever, or it just is not a property we want to keep. But more often than not, my future self would thank me if I kept the property. So I have to work, do everything I can to do that. And lastly, on my rant, is that I learned from flipping that a huge chunk of this business in real estate involves operations, rehab, construction. And it also happens to be one of the biggest things a lot of investors avoid, which is rehab, construction, and operations. We get focused on the deal, not everything in between on the deal, which is the actual operations and construction and stuff of most projects. And through flipping, it made us very good at that. So it just makes deals a lot easier for us because of that. So, anyways, that's my rant. That's my story. That's what we got. So,
You've got this event coming up, the Limitless Expo with Ken McElroy. I'm going to be down there as well.
yes, sir.
Why don't you tell everyone what they're going to learn? Because I went to it last year and the year before, and I was just shocked at the presenters, the caliber of the people that were there, the caliber of the investors, the deal making or networking that went on. I have to say it was the best event I've attended from that standpoint. Now, obviously, I'm there, looking for clients,
Totally.
but just the quality of the whole thing. So if you could, tell the listeners that are watching this right now about the event, and if they want to attend the event, which I highly encourage everyone to do, how they could do that.
No, hey, thanks for the plug.
Yeah.
If you guys are interested in more details, go to go.limitlessexpo.com. All the event details are on there for sure. But what I think is what I've gotten the most out of running that conference with Ken McElroy, and for those of you guys that don't know Ken McElroy, I mean, he's got nearly 3 billion assets under management for multifamily. He owns them all with his business partner Ross, and he's the real deal. So if you watch his YouTube or watch anything else he does, like what you see is what you get. That's really who he is. What I kind of learned since Ken and I created the Limitless Expo in 2022, and it was originally his kind of like spark of an idea. And it was a perfect partnership between the two of us because he had the idea, but like I knew how to turn it into like a forest fire through running conventions and conferences and events and stuff. But like for him, his main purpose why we originally thought about it is like, hey, there's so much going on right now. This is 2022, like where there's a lot of uncertainty. This is January 2022. He's just like the rates are going to go up and people are get slapped in the face and they don't know what's coming, right? And he saw in the multifamily world how many people were buying when the deals didn't really make sense to him. And so he was holding back, right? So he's just like, people need more financial education, not just in real estate, but they need more financial education on money and what's happening in the world and what's happening in the US economy and what's happening in geopolitical stuff, like everything. And where can we bring a bunch of people together that aren't going to sell you anything? There's no sales from the stage ever, none of that BS. And we're just operators, like we're operators out there in the trenches. And how can we learn from these people ourselves? So Ken and I had the idea and we thought, well, why don't once a year we try to bring legitimate operators that are in the field, in the trenches, getting after these people don't have social media accounts, but they own, thousands of properties or they're large business owners of some sort, right? Not just real estate. Limitless is actually maybe only 40% real estate. The rest of it is like business, finance, alternative investing strategies, scaling, exiting, buying companies, like all sorts of stuff. Macroeconomics is a huge part of what we go through and whatnot. And how do we bring all these people together so him and I can learn? So selfishly, Ken and I created this so that we can like meet all these speakers. Like we want to meet these people and attendees. And what kind of blew us away, this is now our 4th year, is more along the lines is that we're more interested in the attendees. Like the speakers now are like, yeah, there's some cool dudes. Like there really are, like, and women that are amazing. And so, but I've met way cooler attendees and stuff that are out there. And what I love about it is just like, one, our speakers aren't allowed to just show up and leave. Like we don't let them do that. Like if they're not willing to be an attendee, then we don't want them there. And so, Robert Kiyosaki has been with us every year, and he sits in the front row of these sessions, and he's wandering around just like anybody else. It's one of my best compliments I've ever had in my life was after the very first Limitless, Robert told me and Ken, he's like, this is my favorite conference I've ever been to, and it's the only one I want to go to. And he's been to it every single year, and it is his favorite one. I love it. Like he's been to thousands of these things, and there's a huge pat on my back for sure for that, for Ken and I. But point being is that these are, Ken and I are the avatar for this event. Like Clint, you're the avatar for this event. We want to buy a ticket to go to this event. I'm
Hmm.
plugging it pretty hard, but that's legitimately it, right? Like, so massive networking. We have so much content. It's not even funny. Anything you'd think of is there. It's a buffet of info, right? If you're looking for something, it's going to be there. And especially right now, dude, like there's so much uncertainty out there and so much disruption in so many different markets. Like multifamily hasn't even started to get a bloodbath yet. Like it only just now is going, and it's not even going yet. The lawsuits haven't started yet. That's another whole conversation. Those are coming. So, and there's so much disruption. Like, and you can't go on social media or anything like that without seeing like, we're all screwed. Well, Limitless is a place where at least you can get some more clarity, right? You have people that are actually in the field doing it, and they can say, "This is what I'm seeing, right? This is what I'm doing, right?" And I leave Limitless every year with just a book full of notes, going like new ideas, new strategies, new concepts, and even what I'm doing right now in my real estate business is 100% because of hanging around guys like Ken and the other speakers and seeing what they're doing. I don't know about you, Clint. I hate looking at market research and all that stuff. But what I found is way easier is like having Ken and all his friends do that. And then I go like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
And I just copy, rip off and duplicate as much as possible. So, but anyways, that's
Well,
my
it's the
long
hacks that
pitch.
they teach you there,
Yeah.
that you just don't get from looking at market research. Hey, yeah,
Mhm.
they say this, but this is how I'm putting the deal together, and this is what I see that's working right now. And I find that to be so intriguing about this event. And the other thing is, as you stated, it's not just real estate because there's other ways to make money besides investing into real estate. You can create passive income streams. And that's the thing that blew me away. How many people that were there that just weren't real estate investors, they were there to learn these other strategies.
Yeah. They were there for also to find a place to put money. So,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of accrediteds walking around Limitless for sure. And so a huge chunk of
Hmm.
them and whatnot. And I love it. So if you guys are interested, go to go.limitlessexpo.com. You can use the discount code TARL10, give you an extra discount. Prices do go up on a regular basis. And the next price increase is going to always happen at the end of the month. So the event is July 30th, August 1st, July 31st, right? There's 31 days. July 31, August 1st, August 2nd, Dallas, Texas. Massive conference, great time. Definitely be there.
Your story, and I've watched what you've done over the years because you're a client. And as you stated, buying the properties, knowing how to flip real estate allows you then to evaluate deals. Because I grew up in that. My father would buy properties that were run down. We would go in, we would renovate it, and you would turn it into a rental. So it was all value add.
Correct.
So, how important do you think understanding the ability to value add into real estate is in this market?
I think it's crucial for a lot of reasons because you see value and opportunity where maybe traditional investors don't. And so, like right now, I'm buying in a very old part of the US right now that a lot of these houses are 100 plus years old. And a house that maybe hasn't been remodeled or fixed up in 50, 60 years or longer would scare a lot of traditional investors, and it should. It absolutely should, actually. But somebody that's been doing properties like us for a while, we're like, oh, cool, we could provide value. But additionally, if you think about it, other than buying, even if you bought raw land, right, you still have to understand how to maximize the value of that property. And sometimes it's development, sometimes it's paper lots, sometimes it's sitting on it. Who knows, right? It's infrastructure. If you're buying to build, definitely got to understand construction. If you're buying multifamily, right, doing tenant turns, right, doing unit turns, right? So if somebody moves out, you still got to go turn the property and so forth to be able to get another tenant in it, even if you do it cosmetically. So there's just a massive amount of rehab, construction, maintenance when it comes to real estate that the more you commit to it and the more that you lean into it, the easier this business gets, not harder. And it gets harder when we avoid it. And I've just seen too many people come into this business and want to avoid learning all that stuff. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just something I've seen over the years. So
Well, people want it easy. And,
yeah,
a lot of people invest outside of their geographical location. And then that's oftentimes driven by the cost, right, to
right.
buy the property or the return. But don't you think that the people that are making those types of investments outside of their area, they do so because they don't know how to make their local market work for them because they don't have the experience?
That definitely is a good point, right? Depending on their local market. So sometimes, like let's say that you do live in, let's say you live in Seattle, right? Like which is where I met you,
Hmm.
right? Seattle houses are in Tacoma are 100-year-old houses, right? And there actually is quite a bit of competition in that market for sure. I spent a huge chunk of my career in that market to the point to where even the off-market deals have more competition than the on-market deals, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it is a very true statement. And so if you're in that market, you see price points high because it is, and you also see construction costs are high, and you can have a $100,000 rehab go to 160 pretty fast in Seattle if you're not aware of how to manage it. And a lot of people don't use GCs there anymore because they're too expensive and all these factors. So if you're in that market and you're just trying to get a 6 or 8% return on your money, that's going to be pretty hard to do, actually. So looking outside of the market is something a lot of people do. Like especially if you have any kind
Hmm.
of active income, maybe you have a good job, right? Maybe you have a good business, maybe you're a doctor, lawyer, whatever, something like that. And or maybe you sold your house and you have a lot of cash sitting on the sidelines and you're just looking for a good place to for ROI. Yeah, there's a lot of other better places in the US to do that in and have less risk on the construction and less risk on the value add of the deal for sure, right? I actually don't recommend people that are in those type of markets that unless you want to commit to learning how to remodel 100-year-old houses, then maybe you should actually be looking at a different market. So that's my belief, at least. And so what I've seen over the years, because I've also seen what happens to people when they, if you have a full-time job and you have to sub stuff out, like, and work on it on the weekends, I've also seen people lose a lot, right? Because they've decided to take that on instead of leaning into it. And especially right now, houses are sitting on the market. Depending on the market you're in, there is disruption right now in the market, which I also think is an amazing time to buy. And I think, I think it also pushes a lot of people out of the market right now as well. So, not sure if I'm answering your question, but
Well,
that's
no, you did. I mean, you made a point there that I think's important that people hopefully they picked up on is that, every market you brought up Seattle, there are opportunities there now with,
yep.
putting in the ADUs and the
Oh
smaller
yeah,
dwelling units. And so you can get more value back from those deals, more rental income. But at the same time, when you see that opportunity, what you stated was, hey, you got to use a GC if you don't know how to do it. So that's going to drive up your costs. Or you're the person that is busy and you're trying to do it on the weekends.
yeah,
And, unless you're extremely driven, because my father was that way, he would do it on the weekends. Well, he had two indentured servants. My brother and I, we would help him. Or every day after work, he would go into work at 6. He'd be off by 2:30, and then we'd go work for 3.5, 4 hours on his properties every day. And if you don't have that type of drive and that type of commitment, then it's tough to take a deal and make it profitable. I mean, I know myself just building a chicken coop, right? Trying to do it on the weekends.
yeah,
It's a lot to try to fit in just to do that. I can think about taking on a house. And so, learning, I think, the strategy for your market, seeing where the opportunities are is one thing, but then it's also that other side is, hey, how do I make this work for my lifestyle and where I'm
right.
at? And that's why you said investing on a market. So when you bring up disruption and, you know, is this the time to buy? A lot of investors we've seen here at Anderson, we gauge investor activity based upon how many LLCs are creating. Because as we've done for you, we create separate
Yep.
LLCs. I don't know how many you have now. You have just gobs of
Too
them,
many.
but yeah, right. When they're not setting up as many LLCs, that tells me they're sitting on the sidelines and they're not buying.
Yes.
And you brought that point up now. So could you talk a little bit about the disruption in the market and why people should be buying?
Yeah, so like there's a good buddy of mine many years ago that started buying in '08, '09, or sorry, '09, '10, like whatever. And he looked like a genius. He was out of Portland. He looked like a genius to everybody with what he did. He did not look that way at the time. And people thought he was crazy. And there's a quote he said that I always loved repeating that like, investing in hindsight right now, like hindsight's 2020. We're like, oh, if only I started in 2009, if only I started 2010, oh my God, I would have bought so much, whatever. But when he said something, it's like, if you're not the type of person to run into a burning building, you're probably not the type that would have invested back then, right? And because
Hmm.
everybody else was running away from the market, not running towards it. And news media, even right now, I'm seeing, I mean, the news cycle and social media cycle is so fast, so hot, everything that every person that has like any kind of influence or a social media page or whatever is all like, the market's bad. Brah, I was right. Like this is horrible. It's all going to crash. Like everything. But it's also like hot. It's hot to talk about it. So it also almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy too. And I definitely saw that in 2018. I don't know if you remember this, Clint, but 2018 there was a blip in the Seattle market for sure, where like everything just stopped right for a
Hmm.
moment because the rates went up just a little bit, and like everybody freaked out. And it was only like a 3 month period, but 100%, if you look at what happened in that time period, it was completely self fulfilling. Every realtor, every escrow agent, every broker is like, market's crashing, don't buy. And so they held all their clients back from doing it, even though the rates only went up a little bit. And 3 months later, everybody's like, "Oh, never mind. So let's start buying again." Right? It just became. It was
Yep.
just, I don't know. Like I just remember that. Like there's people that are still like recovering from that little blip, right, during that time period because the market kept hockey sticky. It wouldn't stop going up. So there's a little bit of that because if we look at the fundamentals of what's happening today, there's still a massive supply issue. And even though the demand is low, I believe that's temporary. And it also depends on what market you're in. So, yes, there absolutely are real estate markets out there that aren't doing that well, and they might not do that well later. But there is also an amazing amount of real estate markets that are doing very well because there is no national real estate market when it comes to real estate. There's hundreds of real estate markets and even submarkets of submarkets. Like if we think about Seattle, there's a big difference between Seattle and Bellevue. But there's also a big difference in Seattle between West Seattle and Madrona, right? And there's a big difference between Madrona and Green Lake. And there's a big difference between Green Lake and Delridge, right? Like there's a big difference between block to block depending on what city you're in, right? Like I've been to Chicago multiple times, and I used to invest in Chicago many years ago. It literally could be across the street, like just like across the street, it's a completely different market, right? So because of that, knowing our markets and knowing our sub markets in whatever market you decide to invest in is crucial right now. And it goes back to what are the job growths, right? Like what is the actual infrastructure of that city? Is there demand for people moving in still? And if there is, and there's a supply issue, then long term we're good to go as far as that market's concerned. Whether rates go up or down shouldn't really matter as much in the long term. Short run though, that's where you get hurt. So as a recovering house flipper, Clint, thinking only 4 to 6 months at a time, yes, you can definitely get hurt in that time period, and I have in the past. Thinking 6 to 10 years out, I'm not really worried about that because I don't know anybody that's ever said, "Man, I wish I sold all my real estate 20 years ago. My life would be way better." Nobody's ever
Yeah,
said
right.
that. So, but I can tell you right now, as a house flipper, right? The only projects that I don't like are the ones that are in the middle of construction during a turn when things are changing, because I have to because they only work as a flip. So if we're focused on property, like for me, I try my best to focus on properties that have multiple exit strategies, such as they work as a rental and also a flip. And if that's the case, if the market shifts, then I could still rent it out and handle it. And if the market doesn't, I could always flip it. So that's kind of, I don't know if I've totally forgot your original question already, but I started
Well,
talking.
no, I mean, you said something that's really interesting there is that you buy a property, even if you think it's going to be a rental,
Yep.
but you still buy with the mindset you could flip the deal. So either way, you can make money on it. So it doesn't make money as a rental. You could just flip it and you'll make money that way. That's
Yeah.
that's that's insightful.
Yeah, it's a double, it's being able to have multiple exit strategies. So during right now, so here's the thing. Oh yeah, back to disruption. So yes, there's disruption right now. And if people are running away, that's when we should really be looking. If nobody's buying, that's when we should be buying, right? And we
Hmm.
should, and that's when people are panicking. Like I live outside of Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas has so many houses on the market right now because so many builders just finished their building. And they also have a lot of rental, like tenants, rentals on the market right now because so many multifamilies just came online. So right now that's a win if you're a tenant, because if you're a tenant right now, there's so many, having 3 months free rent does it was probably not the business plan of that multifamily when they got done with it. So
Yeah.
but that's great for the tenant. Right now I live right down the street from a new development that just came online, right? And I live in rural part of outside of Austin, and there's I've never seen so many properties on the market right now. So right now is the time to lowball offer people. Right now is the time to and people need to sell, right? And and thinking long term. Now as a house flipper, there could be a hesitation where even that lowball offer I'm giving might not be low enough if the market continues to stall out more. And that's why we have to think through that. But if I'm a landlord or a BRRRR investor, that lowball offer that the rent that property still is going to pay me the rent that I need, that's great, right? And now's the time to be taking advantage of that and whatnot. So not the time to run away from it. And so, but having that multiple exit strategy helps protect us and mitigate risk. And I think the biggest message I can give to people, Clint, is that investing is not about profit; it's about mitigating risk. And we want to
Hmm.
protect our downside first, profit second. And so protect the principal. And I think that anybody that's been in this business long enough, even not even in real estate, any investment type sake, if you talk to the people that have been here the longest, they all say they mitigate risk first and then they look at profit. And so not the other way around.
Yeah, one thing that came to mind when you were talking about that is that I was talking to my son a couple months ago, and he was looking at some property in Ohio, and he said, "Dad, this property here is, I think it was an 8 or 9 cap property." He said, "This looks like a really good deal." And I had to break it down for him and show him that in those types of markets, because the property he was looking at was, see, it was about $150,000. The rental income, on that made it an 8 cap, and so you're making maybe $10,000 a year, let's say, off that deal,
Okay.
whatever it was. But I showed him, I said, an 8 cap in that market versus an 8 cap, and you brought up Portland, which, I mean, the hellscape that place is right now. It amazes me that there was an article in the Wall Street that it's still prices are going up.
Yeah.
You pull an 8 cap out of a Portland market where the average price is going to be $700,000. You're better off, I think, going into the Portland. I'm not saying invest in Portland, but
Yeah,
that
no.
type of market, because what so many investors do not calculate, what I've found, and this, I've made this same mistake myself. When you have a turn, because a tenant leaves that property, maybe they leave early or the victim, the turn cost is going to be relatively the same between Ohio and Portland, in my example.
Correct.
But the difference is it's going to be 70% of your profit in Ohio versus 10% of your profit in Portland.
Correct.
And so I found that when you evaluate cap rates, I also have to factor in what is my cost, my capex, my turn on that, and how much of that gets eaten up, and also the appreciation factor that you're going to pull out of those properties. And I think when people invest out of state or they look in certain markets, sometimes they're not thinking that all the way through because they've never been in that situation, which I've been in on some of my deals where I'm doing a turn. I'm thinking, all right, it's going to take me 2 years to recoup this at the
Yeah.
rental rates where I'm at.
You're making an extremely good point. So there's a number of people that get into this industry and they go like, I need to find cheap houses, right? And
Hmm.
100,000, whatever. Oh, I could just go to this market and buy a house for 80. And that's is that a better way to start? And then I usually say, hey, a $10,000 roof is 10,000 on an $80,000 house, as well as a $250,000 house. But your ROI massively changes on that, right? And so it's not saying that you don't buy cheap houses, just saying that we have to go into it full eyes, wide open kind of situation. And typically an $80,000 house in that's today's market is because it's in a very unappreciating market. And so you're not going to recuperate that through appreciation. The other key to single family, Clint, that I've learned over the years is that you're not going to get, you're not going to build lifestyle changing money with a $200 rent house, right? Like where you get cash flowing
Hmm.
$200, especially with tenant turns, right? You spend $2,000 to repaint the property. You just got rid of your entire annual cash flow, right?
Yep.
On a $200 a month cash flowing property that you have debt on. For me, like I'm totally fine with $100, $200 a month per door cash flow, like all day, because I'm not looking at that property as what's going to change my lifestyle. I'm looking at that property as a 1031 exchange opportunity to roll up into another better property over the years that will become the lifestyle changing type properties. And so my bigger process right now today is I'm forcing appreciation through construction and rehab. So if I buy a $100,000 property, putting 50K into it, and it's worth 200 when I'm done, I have 50K of gross equity before costs and all that great stuff that happened. If I sold it, maybe I make 35 grand, right? Because of costs, holding costs, sales costs, whatever. I'm going to pay taxes on that 35K today, right? Which means I'm going to make less, right? So call it 20 or whatever, depending on my income bracket at the time, and
Hmm.
entity structures. So, okay, I can make 20 grand today, or I can leave that in the piggy bank, right? Which is like my savings account, which is not selling the property. And I can leave that in the property and I'm getting $200 a month in cash flow. Let's say if I have debt on it, right? So in that scenario, if my net equity is 35,000 and I'm getting $200 a month, so that's 2,400 a year, my return on equity is something around what is that? 8%, something like that, give or take,
Close. Yeah.
something like that, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. That's better than my savings account in my bank, right? So I'll just leave the money
Hmm.
there. 3 to 5 years from now, let's say that property is worth 250 because it's in a market that's going up because I chose a market that's going up. One, and I decide to sell it. Well, I'm going to 1031 and I'm going to take that equity and put it into a property that's going to cash flow instead of 200 a month. Maybe I could cash flow 600, $800 a month now because I have equity to do that in. And then 3 to 5 years later, I 1031 exchange again, right? And maybe I take 5 or 6 or 10 of these that I've accumulated and 1031 all of them into a multifamily property of some sort or whatever down the line. And the thing that kind of changed my entire thinking on this was this guy, my buddy Thatch Nguyen, his mentor is this guy named
Hmm.
Saul, that's out of Washington, an old school dude. And he's like, you 1031 C class properties to B class and you 1031 B class to A class over time. And you keep doing it until you have a property that you would personally live in if you had to. And then you stop selling at that point. And not that you would live in it, but like you could live in it, right? Which means that
Yep.
it's nice enough for you, right? So 1031 until like it's a property that you would actually live in if you wanted to. And then
Nice enough for your wife, so let's qualify that
right, yeah,
statement.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Maybe I could
Yeah.
live in way worse properties than my wife did. But that changed my entire thinking to go like, okay, all these properties I'm keeping today and in the past are not my end all properties. It's the ones that I'm going to 1031 into in the future. Those are the things, right? And that's why I like single family because if I bought a 100 unit apartment complex, I have to sell the entire 100 unit apartment complex. If I buy 100 properties like single family or duplexes, or whatever, I can knock off 20 of the worst ones and 1031 into something else that's better as it goes on. So that's the long-term thinking. And that's also when you're forcing the appreciation with construction, you don't really care as much about market appreciation because you already forced the appreciation and you're just delaying the taxes. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's in my entire investment strategy, like in how I think about this stuff.
We have a lot of single family homes in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And, they cash flow $800 a month on average, these properties. But my assistant just reached out to me and said, "Hey, that house we bought in that package, we need to put in $20,000 into it now to in CapEx to bring it up. And again, we're only going to be making $800 a month in it. And you get tied up in having, right?
Mm,
I've got all these homes that I want to have. And really what I should be doing is taking those properties, what you just stated, and 1031ing a lot of them and then moving up in property class because we're at a property class. It's great. They're C, D class properties, but I need to be in the B class properties. And I've always thought just go out and buy them. And really what I should do is take what I currently have. And that makes, I'm going to be rethinking my strategy now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of looking at your return on it. The way it kind of changed my thinking was back in 2018 when I did my first, sorry, 2019 when I did my first 1031. It was the first time I felt like an adult, like in real estate investing. I was like, this is what
Yeah.
Rich Dad Poor Dad was all about. This is what all these things were. Like, I'm finally a real estate investor. And I had a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, no, sorry, a 2 bedroom, 1 bath house in Tacoma that I bought in 2016. And then it had about, by the time, like, just because market, whatever, right? I was always cash flowing only $300 a month into it. Like every month, I had 9 grand left in it. So, like, it was a good ROI. But then I looked at it and we had a tenant turn. And I was like, well, if I sold it right now, I'd have like $110,000, right? On this like little 3 bedroom, 1 bath house, or sorry, 2 bedroom, 1 bath house. And I'm like, okay, like, let's see what the grown-ups do and do a 1031. So I took that and I bought a commercial building in downtown Tacoma with it that was fully remodeled already. It was just on the market. And so I was, now just remember, this was the point. Like, I was only getting $300 a month in cash flow on $110,000 of equity. So if you do the math on that, that's like a 2.5% or whatever, or give or
Hmm.
take 2%, 3% ROI on the equity. Well, I took that 110 and I put it on this commercial building. That commercial building generally gives me $1,000 a month in cash flow. I put no extra money into the building. I just put that 110 and rolled it over. So the same 110 is now getting 10% return on equity. But I didn't have to do anything else, right? I just moved it over. Now it took like 3, 4 months to rent it out, but it's got a 5-year lease on it now. So it's like great. And it also appreciates over time because commercial's great. I like commercial buildings, but the right ones, by the way. And all I did was like that. Doing that 11031 made me start looking at all my properties for ROI on equity. So my cash flow was great 5 years ago, but now I'm like, but my equity's up. Is it still great? And can I move that equity to something else that gets me a better ROI on that equity and a 1031? If you don't know what you're going to do with the money, then don't sell it. Is that like, don't ever sell it because you have 45 days, and you could definitely.
Yeah.
I've had at least 3 failed 1031s already, and that's 3 too many for me. And it's having to take that capex hit because you couldn't find a building or you moved too quickly or something falls apart or whatever. Like, kind of sucks. But so don't do that. So yeah,
Or you do the reverse.
reverse. Oh, dude, one of my best deals is a reverse 1031 exchange for sure. It's funny that you brought. Most people have no clue what that is, Clint. What a
Yeah.
reverse.
Why don't you explain to them what a reverse exchange is?
I'll just tell you the one that I've done, right?
Hmm.
Another commercial building, but this one was a mixed use, which I love. I love mixed use in the right markets and right spots. So this has 3 apartments on top, and it has 3 commercial units on bottom, right in downtown Tacoma. And the property was off market for 760, and I was like, okay, we got to close quick. I didn't have a property I was going to go sell at the time, so I I just happened to have a property that could do a 10, like that tenant just turned. I'm like, cool, throw it on the market, but I had to close on the commercial purchase right away, so I couldn't wait to sell the other property to be able to do a traditional 1031. So a reverse 1031 is where you buy the property first and then sell the property that you want to 1031 and do it's basically a delayed 1031, and they take the proceeds and then they put the money into the property you bought for the 1031, and then they close it out after that's done. But you have to have a 1031 exchange company will do that, which most will. And you also have to be able to buy the property without the 1031. So, and additionally, what happens is that, so this commercial building, the 1031 exchange company closes on it and they take title of the property.
Hmm.
You are the beneficiary of the entity. So they create a new entity where they are they run it, they're the managers, and you're technically a member, right? But they have full control of it, you don't, right? So you have to have a lender that's cool with that because you don't technically have title, right? Or clear title in that scenario. So your lender has to be cool with that. So that's traditionally going to be a hard money lender, private money lender. You're not typically going to get traditional financing on this. And so we had to do that first. And then we put the property up that I sold on the market. It sold quickly, and it had about 250K of equity, give or take. And that then gets closed by the same 1031 exchange company, and they take that money. You can't touch it. Don't touch it. They then take that money, and then once they have that, They take your money and they put it onto the building you just bought, if that's what you want to do. It's not what I did. I did something a little different. And then they close out the 1031 and then transfer the title of the entity over to you, and then you're done, right? So it delays. It's more expensive, takes a little bit longer, right? All that great stuff, but it's awesome when you do it. What
Yeah.
I decided to do was buy the property with private money lender, right? Which I love private money lenders. So if you're out there, email me. So I bought the property with private money lender, and then I took the 1031 that I had, left it with the 1031 exchange company, so the $250,000 that was there, and they held on to it, and I used all of that money for construction. So instead, so you have 6 months basically to use the
Hmm.
money, and then they have to close it up. So over that 6 month period, every time I had an invoice or a bill from a contractor, I would send it to the 1031 exchange, and they would take basically like a construction draw. They would take my 250 and they would send 30 grand to the roofer, or they would send 40 grand to the GC or whatever. And they charged me, a transaction fee every time he did. It was like 30 or $50 or something. And they did that. And they did that with the 1031 exchange money. I spent every penny of that 250 on construction, and that building then appraised for 1.6 when I was done, and I owed about a million on it. And then I did a refinance, right, into permanent financing with one of the local banks on a commercial loan and on a $1.6 million building that I then have a $1 million loan on, and I have no money in it. So actually, I have like 40 grand into it. Actually, that's not true. So, when all the units are rented, the cash flow is like 5 grand a month. So it's like, and that was from a $380 a month rental, so that I had that I was then able
Amazing
to
how
do
that
that.
works, huh?
It's awesome. It's my favorite deal I've ever done for long term. And so yes, this is I guess I totally was not planning on talking about that, but like the point of it, that one is that like the more we become a student of these tools and resources, and the more we lean into the actual, I guess the thing, house flippers, Clint, get so focused on like buying a deal in construction, buying a deal in construction, buying a deal in construction. But investing is about getting an ROI on your money. It's not about, that's all it is, right? We're taking dollars and turning them into more dollars. So becoming a student on actual investing tactics and investment strategies is like where it's all at. And so it's not, the construction's a tool that allows you to get a better ROI. But the whole point of learning it is not so that you can learn how to install cabinets. You learn it so you can get a better ROI. And it's not so you can do it too. It's so that you can hire other people to do it, so you can do more
Correct.
volume and get a better ROI, right? Like everything's about that ROI, return on investment. And or else why are we doing it? We're just replacing a job for a job at that point.
Yeah, and that strategy, what you just mentioned, again, you have to buy in the right market where you're going to have the appreciation where that can work
Totally.
because there's a lot of markets out there that do not appreciate. Yeah, and they throw off that they're cheaper houses, they throw off cash flow, and we've already talked about the issues there. But you're never going to be able to roll those unless you're able to force appreciation in that property by doing the rehab work. So then you can get something which you can move it into another deal like you talked about. Hey, thanks for coming on and sharing the time with us and your insight into the market. I really appreciated it.
Appreciate you. Thank you for the time. I love this topic, right? This is great.
Yeah, it's
So
awesome.
yeah. Thank you
All
for
right,
being
Tarl.
my attorney too. So those guys, hey, quick, Clint has been my attorney for many, many years. We didn't even talk about that, right? I
Yeah.
didn't, I remember I didn't have any of my asset protection stuff set up until I met Clint. I actually met him through Rich and Kathy Fecky, and
Hmm.
as soon as I sat down, I'm like, man, I've been doing this wrong. So there are things that have happened in my business that if I would have set it up the way that Clint and his team set it up originally, would have reduced my headaches, like for
Yeah.
sure, right? Those are long stories, every one of them, but there's definitely a lot of learning lessons there. So the sooner you get this stuff set up, the easier life is in real estate investing. Absolutely.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.